Hello, and welcome back to Nameless Studio. I'm your host, Tyler. Today we're going to continue working on the Last of Us piece that we started yesterday. As you recall, we pretty much just got the base layer of texture and then put on that base layer of encaustic medium. And that's as far as we got yesterday because we did a lot of work on really toning in that first base layer. So with that in mind, why don't we jump right on in to the next stage of this piece. Okay, so we are going to dive right in on this piece and start with our real first layer of encaustic. And we are going to start with some titanium white encaustic brick, and we're not even really going to dilute this. We want a pretty strong contrast to the base layer that we've already put down. So at this point we are just putting really straight titanium whites down on our small piece right now, with the eventual idea that we're really going to sort of diffuse this out and really hopefully get some very interesting soft edges and marks as we go along with it. Now we're going to add just a little bit of that intense carbon black that we had put down on the base layer, mostly because we want just a little bit of interaction with something else with that white, so that will help us get some more interesting details and textures and elements as those two highly contrasted colors start to mix together ever so slightly. So we're going to go ahead and take the butane torch to this piece, and as I said, what we're trying to do right here is really kind of feather out the white so that we're getting some more tendril looking, some stretched sort of out things that kind of look a little fungus or mushroom like in some manners, getting those sort of like ridges that you see on the other side of mushrooms and the like. So we are just taking very soft, almost circular motions with the torch to just help sort of diffuse especially those outlying edges. And as we're doing that, paying close attention to see how that little bit of black and that white are interacting with each other. So at this point, the top left is looking pretty good. Liking how that's sort of spreading out and sort of looking up there. Now that we've set it a little bit, we're going to go ahead and kind of do the same thing kind of in the other direction with the bottom right side here just a little bit. Right now we're really just trying to get a nice base bit of texture of this white that we're going to be pulling some back away from that as well, and we're all said and done. But really it's all about letting that paint stretch as much as possible while still maintaining a interesting composition with some really cool textures and movement between the two elements at play right now. So, and when you heat areas so much at this point, you kind of have to let them sit and dry. You'll start to see as the encaustic cools, it sort of sucks into a center point just a little bit. You can only kind of see it right now because we have such heavy white going on, so it's hard to see some of the detail happening in here. Next week there'll be some very good shots of those scenarios. But when you are fusing them, you need to give it a little bit of time to finish sort of cooling down, because even though we might not be able to see it, that paint can start to move a little bit, especially if you are holding it to a vertical axis. So now we're going to pull some bits away that weren't quite working or that we didn't use. Some of those black elements didn't really fuse quite well. We really only wanted them in a couple little areas to really showcase what those two would do when coming in contact with each other. So we're going to be scraping away quite a bit, especially on this lower bit right here at the moment. So as we're scraping a little bit away from this piece, I thought I'd take a moment to actually talk a bit about the game that we are basing this off of a little bit. And just so everyone knows, there will be no spoilers to the story of either the first or the second game. But I just want to talk briefly about the second game of the series, the one that was just recently came out and the one that I just finished playing. I have to say, I very much enjoyed the game. I thought gameplay-wise, the stealth was fantastic, the enemy AI and its adaptability and its randomness and it all came together really well. It's a beautiful game. Character animations are great, the world just looks fantastic. I have to say, with its one big stumble was with the storytelling. The characters itself were pretty decent. I actually enjoyed quite a few of them, but the actual story that was being told, doesn't hold a candle at all to the first game. That story, I think, it was told spectacularly well, and it was nice, concise, straightforward. This one is trying to, I think, tackle too many elements vaguely at best, and is trying to be a little too inclusive in what it's doing without really having reason to do so. I also thought the pacing of this of the story was awful. The momentum just dies about halfway through the game. I won't go into any more detail than that. I just have to say the story overall was the weakest part of this for me. Although, I would recommend it, especially if you enjoyed the first game, and I will probably go back to it at some point, if nothing else, because I thought the gameplay was that good, that despite the story, I would go back to it just to stealth around and explore more than anything else. So, those are my 2 cents on the game. Let me know what you think of that down in the comments below. Would love to get a dialogue going about that. So as you can see now, I've now kind of worked into the meat of the white here to scrape stuff away to get a little bit more sort of depth happening here. Playing with taking some of that white away, showing more of that gray underneath. So we are really sort of showcasing that central element now here. Now I'm taking a slight blowtorch wash to this at this point because I did scrape away quite a bit. So there was quite a bit of X-Acto knife scrape marks, and I wanted to lessen that as much as possible for now. So with that slight fusion there, we're now going to go over with some of the Neocolor pastel and add just a little bit of color here. Because if you recall from the images I showed you last time, also shown here, these fungal zombie creatures, while the fungus itself kind of has a white base, there seems to be the newer growth is portrayed in sort of this reddish, bloody orange tone. So we're going to add some of that going on in here. Again, the Neo Pastels being a water-soluble oil pastel, so I'm able to create some wash elements here. So at the moment I'm just using a very soft sort of rusty orange just to create a little bit of a base as we go here. And then what I'm going to be doing in just a minute is taking the much more vibrant red and have a little bit diluted in water, and I'm painting that directly onto the piece now. So that gives us the really bright reddish orange sort of edge on this sort of fungal base that we have going on here. And as I've said before, with the Neocolor pastels, when doing a wash, it's very careful to let it dry properly, because as it dries, depending on the color and the vibrancy of it, once it dries, can sort of dissipate just a bit. And I don't really want much of that to happen here, so I want the red to stay central. I don't want to move and diffuse too much so that by the time it dries, it doesn't really show as much of anything. But at the same time, I want to move it just a little bit so I have some almost like ridges of where this neo-pastel sort of gathers. So we have almost like a red edge on the inner part rather than the outer part. So that creates another sort of dynamic line aspect to counter with the white and the black. So that's what you see me doing right now, is trying to orient the piece so that that red line stays in there, and now you're seeing me kind of put a little wedge underneath one side of this so that it dries properly. Now that it's dry, we're still pretty early in on this composition, so I'm going to add some line elements here that will definitely be diffused as we go on. But I'm using the red transfer paper that we made back in the Miracle Man videos. Again, this was done just with tracing paper and some Koh-I-Noor Woodless colored pencils. And then I'm using my trusty little boxy pen here to draw in some line elements. These aren't going to show terribly well, but they'll definitely inform the overall piece. And if you notice, you're not going to really see it in this piece, but you notice I'm going over elements that I've already drawn on this transfer paper before. And on a starker color, like a white, you would notice that those lines I'm drawing over the other lines will actually, there's no more colored pencil to transfer on those spots. So you'll actually get some almost like dotted or gradiated line elements doing it that way, because you no longer have that pigmentation to transfer over. So you can create some really interesting elements when you kind of go back over elements that you've already kind of used as transfer paper. So that's an interesting to keep in mind, especially if you want to create not such stark, dynamic, simple lines. This can create much more of a hatched line there. And the red element was nice, but I want to add something that's a little bit more vibrant in here as well. Again, it's going to get covered up quite a bit, but now that we've added the red, we're going to add a bit more white as well to just help sort of overall balance the piece this way. So we are taking, this is I buy in bulk both the white and the black transfer paper simply because I use so much of it. It would be a huge pain to be just sort of by hand scraping down a lot of colored pencil to make my own black and white. So I do opt to simply buy that stuff. It's a lot easier to find online, all the colored stuff you can find, but then you're really stuck in whatever colors those are. When making your own though, you can really hone in whatever color you want so long as you have the colored pencil colors to use. And that is where we are going to end for today. Even with just those couple little layers, we have added quite a bit to this piece. And now for the rest of the week, we are going to be adding in a lot of very small details, a lot of clear coat layers, little things to really help hone in on detail and texture and those sort of elements. So stay tuned for that. As always, I've been Tyler with Namo Studio. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like below and subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, be seeing you.